we'll be going over IRS Form 5329, additional taxes on qualified plans to include IRAs and other tax-favored accounts. This is a form that once completed, you should attach to your Form 1040, 1040-SR, or 1040-NR. There are 9 parts to this 2-page tax form, but before we cover each part, let's go over a couple of administrative items. New for tax year 2022, the exception to the 10% additional tax for early distributions has been expanded to include additional distributions to qualified public safety employees after separation from service on or after December 30th, 2022. For more information, please refer to the form instructions. Taxpayers should use Form 5329 to report additional taxes on IRAs, other qualified retirement plans, modified endowment contracts, Coverdell ESAs, QTPs, Archer MSAs, HSAs, or ABLE accounts. You must file Form 5329 if any of the following apply. 1. You received a distribution from a Roth IRA and either the amount on line 25C of Form 8606 non-deductible IRAs is more than 0, or the distribution includes a recapture amount subject to the 10% additional tax, or it's a qualified first-time homebuyer distribution. 2. You received a distribution subject to the tax on early distributions from a qualified retirement plan. However, if distribution code 1 is shown correctly in box 7 of all forms 1099-R and you owe the additional tax on the full amount for each form 1099-R, you do not have to file 5329. Instead, follow the instructions for Schedule 2, line 8, and the instructions for Form 1040, or the instructions for Form 1040-NR. 3. You received a distribution subject to the tax on early distributions from a qualified retirement plan, and you meet an exception to the tax on early distributions from the list shown later, but box 7 of your form doesn't indicate an exception, or the exception does not apply to the entire distribution. 4. You received taxable distributions from Coverdell ESAs, QTPs, or ABLE accounts. 5. The contributions for the tax year for your traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, Coverdell ESAs, Archer MSAs, HSAs, or ABLE accounts exceed your maximum contribution limit, or you had a tax due from an excess contribution from your prior year's form. And finally, you did not receive the minimum required distribution from your qualified retirement plan. If you are filing Form 5329, you must use for a prior year, you must use the prior year's version of the form. At the top of Form 5329, you'll enter the name of the individual subject to additional tax along with their Social Security number. If you and your spouse are required to each file 5329, complete a separate form for each of you. Then include the combined tax on Schedule 2 of your Form 1040, line 8. If you're filing an amended tax return, check the box at the top of page 1 of the form. Do not use the 2022 Form 5329 to amend your return for any other tax year. Below the name and Social Security number, you'll complete the home address or P.O. box, city, state, and zip code only if you are filing this form by itself and not with your tax return. As a reminder, if you only owe the additional 10% on a full amount of all early distributions, you may be able to report this tax directly on Schedule 2, Line 8, without filing Form 5329. In Part 1, we'll cover the additional tax on early distributions. You'll complete this part if you took a taxable distribution other than a qualified disaster distribution before reaching age 59 and a half from a qualified retirement plan to include an IRA or modified endowment contract, unless you are reporting this tax directly on Schedule 2. You may also have to complete this part to indicate that you qualify for an exception to the additional tax on early distributions or for certain Roth IRA distributions. For more details, see the form instructions. On line 1, you'll enter the amount of early distributions includable in income other than qualified disaster distributions that you receive from either a qualified retirement plan or a modified endowment contract. Let's imagine for the tax year that you withdrew $5,000. That was an early distribution. On line 2, you'll enter the early distributions included on line 1 that are not subject to the additional tax. In the space provided, you'll enter the applicable exception number, which ranges from 1 to 21. If there is more than one exception, you'll enter 99. You can find the exception numbers in the form instructions. For the purpose of this example, we'll assume that all early distributions are also subject to the additional tax. On line 3, you will subtract the difference between line 1 and line 2. In this case, that would be $5,000 since we've determined that all early distributions are also subject to the additional tax. In line 4, you'll calculate the additional tax. Enter 10% of the amount on line 3. You will include this amount on Schedule 2, line 8. If any of the amount on line 3 was distribution from a simple IRA, you may have to include 25% of that amount on line 4 instead of 10%. Please refer to the form instructions for more detail. In Part 2, we'll calculate the additional tax on certain distributions from education accounts and ABLE accounts. You'll complete this part if you included any amount in income on Schedule 1, line 8Z, from a Coverdell Education Savings Account or a qualified tuition program, or on Schedule 1, line 8Q, from an ABLE account. You'll go through a similar calculation where you'll enter the distributions included in income, then you'll on line 6, you will include the distributions not subject to the additional tax. So for this example, we've determined that $5,000 were considered to be distributions included in income from a Coverdell ESA. Of that, $1,000 was not subject to an additional tax. On line 7, you will calculate the amount subject to additional tax by subtracting line 6 from line 5. And in line 8, we will enter 10% of the number on line 7 as the additional tax. This number you will include on Schedule 2, line 8. Part 3 calculates the additional tax on excess contributions to traditional IRAs. You will complete this part if you contributed more to your traditional IRAs for 2022 than is allowable, or if you had an amount on line 17 from last year's 5329. On line 9, you'll enter the amount of your excess contributions from line 16 of your previous year's Form 5329. If 0, then you'll go to line 15. If this is not 0, then you'll need to go to line 10. In line 10, if your traditional IRA contributions for the tax year are less than your maximum allowable contributions, then you should refer to the form instructions. And in the form instructions, it states, enter the difference, if any, of your contribution limit minus your contributions to traditional and Roth IRAs for the tax year. In line 11, you'll enter the tax year's traditional IRA distributions that you included in income. Do not include any withdrawn contributions as they are reported on line 12. In line 12, you will enter any amounts that you included on line 9, which are excess contributions to your traditional IRAs for 1976 through 2020 that you had returned to you in 2022, and any 2021 excess contributions that you had returned to you in 2022 after the due date of your 2021 tax return if you did not claim a deduction for the excess contributions, no traditional IRA deduction was allowable, and the total contributions to your traditional IRAs for the tax year were not more than the amounts shown in the table in the instructions. And in the instructions, there is a table for each tax year dating to before 1997 of the contribution limits for IRA contributions. In line 13, you'll add lines 10, 11, and 12. From here, in line 14, you will subtract line 13 from line 9. If this is 0 or less, enter 0. For line 15, enter the excess contributions for the given tax year unless they were withdrawn in a timely manner. You can withdraw some or all of your excess contributions for the tax year, and they will be treated as not having been contributed if you make the withdrawal by the due date to include extensions of your tax return. You do not claim a traditional IRA deduction for the withdrawn contributions, and you withdraw any earnings on the withdrawn contributions and include the earnings in gross income. In line 16, you'll add lines 14 and 15. This represents your total excess contributions. And in line 17, you will enter 6% of the smaller of line 16 total excess contributions, or the value of your traditional IRAs as of December 31st, 2022. This includes 2022 contributions that were made in 2023. Enter this amount also on Schedule 2, line 8. Part 4 contains the calculation for excess contributions to Roth IRAs. For line 18, you'll enter your excess contributions from line 24 of your prior year 5329. If this is 0, you will go directly to line 23. If not, you will go to line 19. In line 19, if your Roth IRA contributions are less than your maximum allowable contribution limit, then enter the difference. Your contribution limit is generally the same as the contribution limit for traditional IRAs, reduced by the amount that you actually contributed to a traditional IRA. But your contribution limit for Roth IRAs may be further reduced or eliminated if your modified adjusted gross income for Roth IRA purposes is over the amount indicated in the form instructions. For line 20, you will enter the amount from Form 8606, line 19, plus any qualified distributions. If you withdrew the entire balance of all Roth IRAs, do not enter less than the amount on line 18. For line 21, you will add lines 19 and 20. For line 22, prior year excess contributions, you will subtract line 21 from line 18. If this number is 0 or less, enter 0. For line 23, you will enter the excess of your contributions to Roth IRAs over your contribution limit. Do not include rollovers in figuring your excess contributions. You can withdraw some or all of your excess contributions, and they will be treated as not having been contributed if you make the withdrawal by the due date, including extensions of your tax return, and you withdraw all earnings on the withdrawn contributions and include those earnings in gross income. In line 24, you will add the prior year excess contributions in line 22 to the current year excess contributions in line 23. This represents your total excess contributions for all tax years. And in line 25, you will enter 6% of the smaller of line 24 or the value of your Roth IRAs on the last calendar day of the tax year. You will include this amount on Schedule 2, line 8. For Part 5, we will calculate the additional tax on excess contributions for Coverdell ESAs. For line 26, enter the excess contributions from line 32 of last year's Form 5329. If this is 0, go directly to line 31. For line 27, if the max contributions for 2022 were less than the maximum allowable contribution, see the form instructions, which indicate that you should enter the excess, if any, of the maximum amount that can be contributed to your Coverdell ESAs over the amount actually contributed. Your contribution limit is the smaller of $2,000 or the sum of the maximum amounts the contributors to your Coverdell ESAs are allowed to contribute. For line 28, you'll enter the current year distributions from your Coverdell ESAs. Do not include rollovers or withdrawn excess contributions. For line 29, you will add lines 27 and 28. And for line 30, you will subtract the result from line 29 from the number that is in line 26. This represents your prior year excess contributions. If this number is 0 or less, enter 0. For line 31, enter the excess contributions for the current tax year based on the instructions. You can also withdraw some or all of the excess contributions, and they will be treated as not having been contributed if you make the withdrawal before June 1st of the following tax year. For 2022, that would be June 1st of 2023, and you also withdraw any income earned on the withdrawn contributions and include those earnings in gross income. In line 32, you will combine lines 30 and 31, and this represents your total excess contributions. To calculate your additional tax on line 33, you will enter 6% of the smaller of either line 32 or the value of your Coverdell ESAs as of the end of the previous tax year, in this case, December 31st, 2022. Include this amount also on Schedule 2, line 8. For Part 6, you will calculate the additional tax on excess contributions to Archer MSAs. Complete this part if you or your employer contributed more to your Archer MSAs than is allowable, or if you had an amount on line 41 from last year's Form 5329. In line 34, you will enter the excess contributions from line 40 of your previous year's 5329. For more details, see the instructions, and if this number is 0, go directly to line 39. For line 35, if the contributions for the current year are less than the maximum allowable, refer to the instructions, which will tell you to enter the difference between the actual contribution and the contribution limit. Your contribution limit is the smaller of line 3 or line 4 contained on Form 8853, Archer MSAs, and long-term care insurance contracts. In line 36, you'll enter the 2022 distributions from your Archer MSAs from Form 8853, line 8. In line 37, you will add lines 35 and 36. For line 38, you will subtract line 37 from line 34, and this represents your total prior year excess contributions. If this number is 0 or less, enter 0. For line 39, you'll enter your excess contributions for 2022. You can withdraw some or all of the excess contributions, and they will be treated as not having been contributed if you make the withdrawal by the due date to include extensions of your tax return, and you withdraw all income and include these earnings in gross income for the year. In line 40, you will add lines 38 and 39. This represents your total excess contributions. For line 41, additional tax, calculate 6% of the smaller of line 40 or the value of your Archer MSAs as of the end of the tax year. Include this amount on Schedule 2, line 8. For Part 7, additional tax on excess contributions to health savings accounts. You will complete this part if you, someone on your behalf, or your employer contributed more to your HSAs for the tax year than is allowable, or if you had an amount on line 49 of your previous year's Form 5329. For line 42, enter the excess contributions from your previous year's Form 5329. If this is 0, go directly to line 47. And line 43, if the contributions for the year are less than the maximum allowable, subtract the difference. Otherwise, enter 0. For line 44, this represents your distributions from your HSAs. Line 16, enter this amount based on what appears on Form 8889, line 16. For line 45, combine lines 43 and 44. For line 46, you will subtract line 45 from line 42. If this number is 0 or less, enter 0. For line 47, excess contributions for 2022, you will enter the excess of your contributions over your contribution limit. You will also include on this line any excess contributions that your employer may have made. You can withdraw some or all of the excess contributions for the year, and they will be treated as not having been contributed if you make the withdrawal by the due date of your tax return and you withdraw any income earned on the withdrawn contributions and include these earnings in gross income. For line 47, once you've calculated your excess contributions for the year, you will add this number to the number in line 46 representing your prior year excess contributions and enter that total in line 48. This represents your total excess contributions. For line 49, you will enter 6% of the smaller of line 48 or the value of your HSAs at the end of the tax year. Also include this amount on Schedule 2, line 8. For Part 8, additional tax on excess contributions to an ABLE account, you will only complete this if contributions to your ABLE account is more than allowable. On line 50, you'll enter the excess contributions to your ABLE account for the given tax year. you may need to see the form instructions for additional detail. In line 51, enter 6% of the smaller of line 50 or the value of your able account at the end of the tax year. Include this amount on Schedule 2, line 8. Part 9 is the additional tax on excess accumulation in qualified retirement plans to include IRAs. You will complete this part if you did not receive the required minimum distribution from your qualified plan. In line 52, you will enter the minimum required distribution for the tax year. If this is your first year of being eligible for required minimum distributions, you should see the form instructions for more detail. Line 53, enter the amount actually distributed to you in the tax year. In line 54, subtract line 53 from line 52. If this number is 0 or less, enter 0. In line 55, enter 50% of the amount on line 54. Include this total on Schedule 2, line 8. At the bottom of the tax form, you'll see a signature block and date field. Understand that you are signing this form under the penalty of perjury and that this information is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. Below that contains your tax preparer's information, name, signature, date, the PTIN. If they work for a firm, the firm's name, address, the firm's employer identification number, and phone number follow. That completes our review of IRS Form 5329. You may find an article that we've written about this form on our website. Go to teachmepersonalfinance.com, type in IRS Form 5329 in the search bar, and our article should appear. We also have posted articles on some of the other tax forms previously discussed in this video, to include IRS Form 8806, non-deductible IRAs, IRS Form 8853, Archer MSAs, and IRS Form 8889, health savings accounts. You may find our articles and videos either on the YouTube channel or on the website teachmepersonalfinance.com. Simply type the form number into the search bar and you should find the related article or video. If you like our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. And if you have any questions or comments, as always, please post them in the comments section. Thank you.